And disco. Nice echo there. There's that. And what's going on, guys? Yeah. Well, I just saw Deadpool versus Wolverine finally. I saw it yesterday, and man, he was awesome. He was great. I thought it was fucking amazing. And I was, I wanted to do the Channing Tatum, so it's good that well, at least it looks like Gambit. I was going for the Channing Tatum type, but that's what I'm kind of going for right now. I'm going to be doing a podcast episode on uh, Deadpool Wolverine. That was excellent, man. That was a great fucking movie. Even though I knew half of the, what's it called? Easter eggs and everything that happened in it. Because thanks, internet, for not shitting the fuck up. But it was worth it. It was great to watch all of it happen, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. It was excellent. Babo, what's going on, man? I'm working on your piece on the side. Had a couple of false starts with it. Had to wait for some Bristol board to come in too. I didn't have Bristol board, and I was like super surprised about that. I was like, how the fuck do I not have Bristol board? And yeah, I didn't. So I don't think they did his eyes as dark as they should be, because they really should be like that inverted iris thing. I didn't see enough of that in the movie, but I thought it was pretty cool. And so what I am looking at is, if you guys ever get into a show, there's a channel called Screen Crush. They do the best Easter egg breakdowns. It's one of the things I've been watching lately, and I'm gonna have it on in the background.
We saw again in Endgame. We also see a Forbes magazine cover with Pepper Potts on the front, celebrating her promotion to the rank of CEO, which happened in Iron Man 2. And we actually saw Happy Hogan reading this same magazine in Iron Man 3. Danny Rand also adorned the cover of Forbes magazine in the Iron Fist Netflix series. And in the background, we also see Ultron's Mark I head from Age of Ultron. On the shelf here, we also see a Mobius strip, just like the one that inspired Tony to go off and create time travel. Right here, we see the suitcase armor from Iron Man 2. That was inspired by Silver Age Iron Man, who actually carried his armor around in a suitcase. This is a poster from the 1954 Stark Exposition, which used to be an annual event held in Flushing, Queens, across the street from where Iron Man director Jon Favreau grew up. And of course, we also saw the Stark Expo in Captain America First Avenger and Iron Man 2. But my favorite Easter egg in this scene is this desk decoration right here. This was from this really fun improvised scene between Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow in Iron Man 2.
This is crazy. It's like a Ferris wheel. I'm trying to get some.
Now, during his interview, Wade mentioned that his former team, X-Force, were all killed by gravity. He is, of course, referring to the funniest sequence in Deadpool 2, where his entire team was murdered one at a time, including Brad Pitt as the Vanisher. He also mentions that Cable didn't test well with audiences, so they wrote him out. They're noting this because at the end of Deadpool 2, Cable said he was going to stick around, and originally Fox was going to set up a Deadpool spin-off X-Force movie. However, all those plans were scrapped when Disney bought Fox. Now there's a small detail during the interview that I really appreciated. We can see that Wade's top button beneath his necktie isn't actually buttoned. This is showing that he is not accustomed to wearing neckties and that he's uncomfortable during the interview. It might also be because his suit is underneath his clothes and buttoning the top button would just make it too tight. He also mentions that he was former Special Forces, like we saw in Wolverine Origins when he fought alongside Wolverine. So guys, this movie is very, very meta, and this entire scene is Wade searching for legitimacy, or as he puts it, to matter. And this is tied directly into the fan discourse regarding Marvel movies. Ever since Marvel Studios started to connect different film franchises, we've had this idea that for a movie to be worth seeing, it had to matter, or to be connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For example, why would you bother going to see the 2015 Fantastic Four film if it wasn't also necessary viewing for Avengers Age of Ultron? So in this scene, Deadpool is pleading for his own franchise to have legitimacy and to connect to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But like I said earlier, this all ties in really well with Deadpool from the comics. Deadpool in the comics is an evil son of a bitch. He keeps Blind Al prisoner inside of his home and then just kills people indiscriminately. And yet, he craves the legitimacy of being a real superhero. Deadpool being self-aware that he's also in a movie franchise is also very similar to the comics. In fact, much of this movie is based on the comic book Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe and Deadpool Kills Deadpool. In both of those comics, Wade is driven insane by the knowledge that he is simply a character in a comic and that his pain and suffering will never end because his pain and suffering are entertaining, and that means that they can sell more comic books. That takes us to Earth 10005, also known as the Fox X-Men universe. Different universe? Yes. So as soon as Marvel started to connect their movies, they had to differentiate which movies were made by Marvel Studios and which ones were made by other studios like Fox. So movies like the Avengers were made by Marvel Studios, while the X-Men movies were made by Fox, and the Spider-Man movies were made by Sony, and so on and so forth. So the way to differentiate the X-Men movies from the Avengers movies was to say that those other movies take place in parallel universes.
These timelines are so confusing.
Wade is now working for a car company called Drive Max, and I actually thought the Max logo looked an awful lot like the HBO Max logo. This could be a dig at Warner Brothers, implying that other superhero universes are just not as good as the MCU. And then Wade goes home and finds a surprise party that we also saw in the trailer. We meet the stars from past Deadpool movies, such as Dopender, Vanessa, Blind Al, Negasonic, Teenage Warhead, Yukio.
And hi, Yukio. That was really nice of you to say hi, so I'm saying hi back.
And Colossus in his newer uniform from the comics, Shatterstar, who is one of the few surviving members of X-Force, and then the guy with the beard. You know, that's Buck. During the party, we find out that Colossus is obsessed with the Great British Bake Off. Same.
Yeah, me too. And you know what? I'm still not over Bingate. Because even if Diana didn't move Ian's baked Alaska out of the freezer on purpose, she did sabotage him by choosing to make room for her own bake over his. And that caused his elimination. And I'm sorry, that lady got all the backlash and she really...
That's enough.
Jargon forever.
Wade's apartment number is 17, and I think this stands for the 17 Marvel films that Fox produced, if you don't count New Mutants. But one thing I really liked about this party is it gave us just a little bit of time with the old Deadpool cast before the movie moved on to include Wolverine and all the past X-Men characters. For instance, we find out that Wade shares a bed with Blind Al, kind of like Charlie and Frank in It's Always Sunny. Like I mentioned earlier, in the comics, Wade actually holds Blind Al prisoner in his apartment, but she doesn't give up on him because she believes that he can become a hero. Then the two of them bond over their shared love of cocaine. They call it Forrest Bump, a parody of Forrest Gump, and White Girl Interrupted, a parody of Your Mom. And even though Disney said cocaine is off limits, they also nicknamed it after a famous Disney song, Do You Want to Build a Snowman?, which was also referenced in Deadpool's death scene in Deadpool 2. So maybe what Deadpool was really saying here is that he could come back to life with some of that sweet, sweet booger sugar. And I also wonder how Kevin Feige feels about Deadpool saying his name out loud in a movie. Like, I know there was a robot Kevin in She-Hulk. So in universe, do you think that Deadpool was actually talking about that version of Kevin? The song playing during this scene is Angel of the Morning, which was also the opening title sequence song in Deadpool 1.
Sticker Mule's transfer stickers make it easy to apply the most intricate designs.
Gambit time, yes indeed. What's up, 4-Leaf?
Vinyl cut stickers or vinyl lettering. Transfer stickers
I
have been
just
around
saw
for decades,
the
but there's
movie
never
the
been a
other day,
go-to place
and
to
so
buy
now
them.
I am just
After more than
binging all the Easter egg videos. I have one on the background if you guys want to watch it. It's the Deadpool Wolverine breakdown by Screen Crush. I like it when they do it. They do a very
In the
good job.
hallway, he says, "This isn't Pretty Woman, I kiss." This is because in the movie Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts plays a prostitute who only has one rule.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Sorry, I meant this rule.
What do you do?
Everything. But I don't kiss on the mouth.
Now notice that all the TVA agents are wearing body cams. This is because, as we see in the post-credit scene, the TVA have hidden cameras all over the multiverse. He also says that pegging is not new for him, a reference to this scene in the first Deadpool movie.
National Women's Day.
Sorry, that entire scene was censored. The Deadpool movies are rated R, but Screen Crush is not. And then Deadpool is taken to the TVA, where he meets Matthew McFadden, who famously played Tom on Succession. Yes! 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 Now, Paradox is not secretly working for Kang, and he doesn't want to start a multiversal war like we at one point, I think, theorized. He is just an admin who wants to climb the ladder, but he doesn't want to wait his turn. And this kind of starched collar, pencil-pushing dickhead is the perfect opponent for a loose cannon like Wade Wilson. His name, Paradox, refers to any kind of inherent contradiction. Usually, we hear paradox in terms of time travel.
The encounter could create a time paradox, the results of which could cause a chain reaction that would unravel the very fabric of the space-time continuum and destroy the entire universe.
But in this case, the name seems to just mark him as an analyst, like Mobius was in the show Loki. Paradox tells him that his universe is destined to die, but that he has a larger purpose. On a metatextual level, that purpose is for him to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because of all the different Marvel movies that Fox made, Deadpool is by far
I'm good,
the most
dude. I just been
profitable
super
film
busy this
franchise
week.
that Marvel
I've had a lot of
introduced
work
to
stuff,
Marvel
school
Studios.
stuff, everything
Now, we
else.
do have a video
So I've
coming
had to
out
break the
explaining
chain
how
and not do as much as I
universes,
wanted to
timelines
be
work in
doing.
the MCU.
And
And a little
so
later in this video,
today I
we'll
got to get
explain
on.
Anchor
Tomorrow I
Beam,
was going to be
how
on,
that
but now I
floating
know I
center
have
and
to
then
be
Wade's
at
universe
school
slowly
during
dying.
the
And in
day.
this scene, Wade does
Thursday I
the
have a
on-screen
thing at
use of varying
school. I have
synchronicities
to
compared
cover
to
a
the movies
class
he
on
later in the
Thursday.
movie. And then
Plus
he
I'm
says,
working at
"Second
night, so.
Fox, I'm going to Disneyland," which, if you're not a sports
But
nerd,
at
you
least
might
things
not
are
know
fucking
is a reference
stable,
to this.
money-wise.
The new TVA set is built like the bridge of an Imperial Star Destroyer, with the officers above and the worker bees in the trench. It's a subtle way of showing the Paradox is on a power trip. And then he shows Wade scenes from a ton of MCU movies. Him fighting Loki in the Avengers, breaking through the doors in First Avenger, saluting Bucky in First Avenger, the airport fight from Civil War, and him confronting Bucky at the end of Winter Soldier. Then we see these group shots from Endgame, Age of Ultron, and the airport fight once again. And on the far right, this looks like a laser version of Cap's shield, like the force field shield that he briefly used in the comics. And finally, when Paradox says, "You could finally matter," we see the Avengers assembling as the Avengers theme plays. And here we also see 3 scenes from Endgame: Thor suiting up against Thanos, the Snap, and T'Challa joining the battle. And then he sees Thor crying over his corpse, which was actually just the scene of Thor crying over Loki in Thor the Dark World, but they superimposed the dying Deadpool. The initials on his katanas are B, R, S, and D, which stand for the names of the Golden Girls, Blanche, Rose, Sophia, and Dorothy. In the comics and the movies, Deadpool is a massive fan of B. Arthur, and the Deadpool Corps even named their spaceship after her. And then we get the gear up montage, where, look at this, guys. For the first time, Deadpool has a comic-accurate belt buckle. Plus, his katanas are now adamantium, so at least it'll be a fair fight later on. Paradox tells the story that Logan was actually the anchor point of his universe, and this has a lot of meanings. So the movie defines an anchor point as the most important being in the universe, and in the comics, these people are called Nexus beings. Wanda Maximoff, for example, is considered to be a Nexus being in the comic books. Think of them like as the axis of a wheel that the entire universe rotates around. And in the show Loki, a Nexus being was defined as the person who caused a timeline to diverge off its normal path. But because Deadpool is such a meta commentary on superhero movies, an anchor being is defined as the star of a franchise. Ever since the first X-Men movie, Wolverine has been the focus of that franchise. And you have to admit that the X franchise did go downhill after Logan, with the exception of Deadpool 2.
So an anchor being would be like Spider-Man or Iron Man?
That's right. Not only can you make the argument that Iron Man is the anchor being of the MCU, but right now, after Iron Man's death at Avengers Endgame, we're seeing the Marvel Cinematic Universe slowly die and lose focus. In fact, Paradox even says that universes normally take a couple thousand years to die, which could be a metaphor for the slow decline of the MCU since Endgame. And I'm not saying slow decline because I hate everything the MCU makes, but you have to admit, the quality has dipped. Now, I love how the TVA agents watching the death scene in Logan were crying, like, the words as if they had watched this 100 times before, which honestly, guys, same. I still watch that scene and I tear up. Paradox admits that he wants to go back to pruning universes and says that he's going to destroy Wade's universe quickly. Wade responds by saying, "You want the old yeller my universe?"
Oh, I love that movie. That's the one about the boy. He meets a really cool dog, and they're really happy, and then they play together, and then I got sleepy.
That's right, buddy. It turns out that Paradox has built a machine called a Time Ripper, which is built from several reset charges that we saw in the show Loki. Reset charges would essentially prune a universe and destroy everyone within it. So this Time Ripper will essentially destroy Wade's universe more quickly. Now later in the movie, we even see that the Time Ripper works by turning the universe into spaghetti strands. And as we saw in Loki Season 2, as a universe disintegrates, it slowly turns into strands of spaghetti. Wade's escape is set to the song Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. Now that song is from the soundtrack of a movie called City of Angels. And that movie was about a romance between an angel who falls in love with Meg Ryan. Similarly, we see Wade Wilson travel from a different plane of existence to give Wolverine purpose in his life. As Wade skips through different universes, Huey Lewis's Power of Love plays. Now this song was famously featured on the soundtrack of Back to the Future, another time travel movie. First, he encounters Wolverine at a bar with comic accurate height. And by the way, this bar is called Live Axe and it's in New York City.
Yeah, it's a good time.
And I loved how Wade catches this axe right as he enters. Now, it was very weird seeing Wolverine with his comic accurate height because he's only 5'4" in the comics. Believe it or not, Hugh Jackman was once a controversial choice for this character because he's like 6'4" instead of 5'4". And then we see a one-handed Wolverine who is also comic accurate to the excellent Age of Apocalypse crossover story. Then we see Wolverine as his alter ego Patch in Madripoor, you know, where this happened.
Embrace the journey, where each moment turns.
Fuck off.
And then we see an incredible recreation of this cover of Uncanny X-Men 251. In this classic issue, the Reavers overtake the X-Men's Australia base and crucify Wolverine. Now, he was actually saved by Jubilee, which was the first time they ever met. Next, he meets another variant of Wolverine, Old Man Logan. Now, Old Man Logan is actually one of the all-time greatest Wolverine comic book stories, and it was partially the inspiration for the movie Logan. It's a great read that I highly recommend. Old Man Logan shoots Wade with a hidden shotgun, calling back to how Bud shot the bride in Kill Bill, because Quentin Tarantino even said that Logan's cowboy look was an inspiration for Bud's iconic hat in the movie. And then we meet the best variant, the person who I hope is the new MCU Wolverine, Henry Cavill. Like Wade says, seeing Cavill as Wolverine was just perfect. And Wade says that they will make up for what those people down the street did to him. This is referring to how Henry Cavill returned to the role of Superman for the movie Black Adam, but as soon as James Gunn took control of the DCU, they let him go just a few days later. And not for nothing, but Ryan Reynolds does tease his red co-star The Rock later on when he says that the balance of power is about to shift in the Marvel Universe, which is a parody of how The Rock tried to take control of the DCEU through a social media post. Next, we see Wolverine in his brown and orange costume, and I'm so glad that they actually credited the creator of that costume, the legendary John Byrne. Wolverine's story has been crafted by a legion of creators like Byrne, Chris Claremont,
Yeah, man. John Byrne, man. When they did that scene in the fucking thing, oh, I wish they gave us 5 minutes of Wolverine fighting fucking Hulk.
And their paychecks. Now, this orange version of Wolverine's costume was originally featured in a deleted scene of the Wolverine that unfortunately didn't make the cut of the movie. Here, we see this orange version of Wolverine is about to square go the Hulk. Now, Wolverine first appeared in The Incredible Hulk number 180, and ever since then, he and the Hulk have gone toe-to-toe many, many times. We've always wanted to see the Hulk fight Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in a movie, and this film teased me just enough for it to hurt.
Don't give me hope.
Notice that when he squares up against the Hulk, his claws look flat, and we can see the Hulk's reflection. This is a recreation of this iconic cover of the Incredible Hulk 340 by Tom McFarlane. And then Deadpool tells the Hulk, "I am Marvel Jesus, you downed creature," before he is slapped away, which is, of course, a reference to this.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
And then we meet worst Wolverine, the star of this movie. When he meets Wade, he says, "Do I know you, bub?" And of course, Wolverine says bub all the time in the comics and all the time in this movie. But you may not know this, but in the first X-Men movie, director Bryan Singer wanted to avoid references to the comic books. He actually forbade comic books from being on set, and then an associate producer named Kevin Feige actually became the go-to source of comic book information for the cast. So the word bub was not anywhere in the script. Wolverine does say it once, because Hugh Jackman was able to improvise it and slip it in. We're also introduced to Wolverine at a bar. Now this is how we saw Wolverine for the first time in the movie X-Men and in X-Men First Class. Deadpool keeps calling Wolverine Peanut, which I think might be a reference to the Ant-Man movies.
Sweetie, that's pretty amazing, Peanut.
He pulls his gun on Logan, and then we can see that the barrel inscription reads, "Smile and wait for the flash." When he sees Wolverine's yellow costume underneath his clothes, he says, "Well, that only took 20 years. And look, I know all you guys know this, but as Bryan Singer's mandate to make his comic book movie not comic book accurate at all, he not only dressed the X-Men up like Matrix characters, but he mocked us, the fans, for wanting comic accurate suits.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Which, X-Men 97 would avenge earlier this year.
What'd you expect? Black leather?
Later, Deadpool even brags that Logan is no longer a movie. When Deadpool
Nerd.
says on your left, which is a reference to this.
Say left. Come on!
And also to this.
On your left.
And he says that this Wolverine can do musicals. This is a reference to Hugh Jackman's background as a theater actor. When he was originally cast as Wolverine, he had just won an Olivier for playing Curly in Oklahoma. Later in the movie, Deadpool even name drops Hugh Jackman's most recent Broadway run as Harold Hill in The Music Man. Deadpool even acknowledges that Hugh Jackman is joining the MCU at a bit of a low point, which is true. Marvel movies have lost cultural and financial significance in the past couple years, mostly due to the brand being watered down by mediocre Disney Plus shows. Then, Paradox uses a pruning rod to send them to the Void. Now, we did see the Void in Season 1, Episode 5 of Loki. This is where the TVA sends anyone or anything that doesn't fit within their view of the correct flow of time. Deadpool even references that same episode of Loki in the movie. Now, the giant cloud dog that eats these artifacts is called a Lyeth, and he was weaponized by Kang the Conqueror following the Multiversal War. But like I said, you guys really don't need to know any of all that backstory for this movie. When they land in the Void, Deadpool says,
Don't just stand there, you ape. Give me a hand up.
and this might be a deep cut reference to the Jetsons.
Don't just stand there, you big ape. Get him out of there.
When Deadpool lands in the Void, he is next to this issue of the comic book Secret Wars. So this is from the 2015 run where Dr. Doom reset reality on a single planet that he ruled as a god. This is very similar to what Cassandra Nova does in this movie. It even makes me wonder if Avengers Secret Wars is even going to be comic book accurate, because this film kind of already did Secret Wars, with variants from several realities fighting one another. Deadpool points out that the Void looks a lot like Mad Max, but that would be IP infringement, because Mad Max is owned by Warner Brothers.
You want to get sued?
Now, the Void is
Want to get
filled with
sued?
Easter eggs that were pruned from other realities. For instance, in the foreground here, we see the classic winged helmet that Thor wears in the comics. This could have been from the same reality as old Loki, who wore a comic-accurate suit that we saw in Episode 5 of Season 1 of Loki. Then again, we saw teenage Thor wear this comic-accurate helmet in Thor: Love and Thunder. So the helmet could be from the Thor variant that Kid Loki murdered in the show Loki. We also see the classic Captain America shield. Here is the Chitauri Leviathan ship, and later we see this Ferris wheel, which is from a set piece in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. There's also a shield carrier right here, and we also saw one of those in the first Deadpool movie. We also see the top of the Harbor Center, the most recognizable building in Vancouver, where Ryan Reynolds is from. Deadpool and Wolverine fight in front of a giant 20th Century Fox logo, which was obviously pruned after Disney bought Fox.
Hold on to yours, boy.
This is appropriate because Paradox essentially is a representation of a Disney executive who wants to do away with the Fox universe as quickly as possible and use the spare parts to augment the MCU. So their first fight is set to Hell's Bells by AC/DC. And I thought this was interesting because the MCU actually began with an AC/DC song.
The all-new GoDaddy Arrow helps you get your business online in minutes with the power of AI. With the perfect name, great
Commercials.
logo, and a beautiful...
Oh, I love Led Zeppelin!
And in the same way, you can say that this movie represents mutants beginning a new phase of the MCU, the Mutant Saga. So these two invincible guys slash each other for a while before Cassandra's forces show up. Notice how they are using remnants of past Fox and other Marvel movies. We see the Fantastic Car, and in a similar dystopian setting in Old Man Logan, the Hulk's kids also joyride in old Fantastic Cars. There's also Red Skull's car from First Avenger, but because it's a variant, it's painted with flames on the side. And the flames look a lot like the ones on this Hyundai that Luis drove in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And of course, there's the Cupcake Truck from Moon Knight. Now, all of these cars receive some sort of Mad Max-like modification using spare parts they found in the wasteland. And to me, these also look like Hydra vehicles from First Avenger. And guys, how awesome was it seeing Chris Evans return to the MCU, but as that jerk-faced Human Torch from the 2005 and 7 Fantastic Four films?
Do you want to help me with the zipper?
Evans is also dressed like an older variant of Cap from the comic book Earth X when he wore a tattered cloak. And Wade can't help but admire his perfect superhero landing just like he did in Deadpool 1.
Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.
He faces off against Aaron Stanford's Pyro. Now, Pyro, one of the best characters from the Bryan Singer movies.
What's your real name, John? Pyro.
He was a mutant student at Xavier's school in X2, but then joined Magneto's forces in X-Men 3: The Last Stand. In fact, there's a lot of references to The Last Stand that we're going to talk about later on. So Pyro's power is to control fire, so the Human Torch was not much of a match for him. And then we get the return of Tyler Mane as Sabretooth. So Deadpool calls him Logan's brother, which is from the X-Men Origins Wolverine film. And in that same film, Ryan Reynolds made his first appearance as Deadpool, where he fought alongside Sabretooth and Wolverine.
My God, you ever shut up, pal? No. Not when I'm awake.
So he would know this information that they were brothers from like past personal experience.
Wait, I thought X-Men Origins Wolverine was no longer canon after the events of Days of Future Past.
These timelines are so confusing.
And Wade cannot resist one last dig at the Mad Max franchise when he holds up Sabretooth's severed head and says, "Behold your queen, Furiosa," which is a reference, of course, to Furiosa, who is bald, so I guess it's parody enough to where they're not going to get sued by WB. When Wade comes to, he's resting tip-to-tip against Hugh Jackman, and he mumbles, "God of Thunder," showing that he just can't wait to have his big moment with Thor. Johnny goes through some exposition explaining what the Void is. He even name-drops Reed Richards, who said that the Void is a metaphysical junkyard. And as they drive, we see these Narvas, otherwise known as Void chickens, that we saw in Loki 105. In the Void, we see this bridge, which could be the Brooklyn Bridge, and it could be here because in the comics, there's actually some dispute about which bridge Gwen Stacy died on. So the incorrect bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, might have been pruned and sent to this reality. It could also be the Brooklyn Bridge from the Incursion in Multiverse of Madness. It's featured very prominently when Strange and Christine walked to the Sanctum Sanctorum. That whole world literally fell apart, so it would make sense if the TVA just pruned the entire thing. We also see pyramids, so this could be a callback to a younger version of Kang the Conqueror named Rama Tut. We saw Rama Tut in the post-credit scene of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. If the TVA is policing Kang variants, then it would make sense that they would prune artifacts that are also related to dangerous Kangs. But since they're also pruning artifacts from the Fox X-Men movies, this can also be the Pyramid of Apocalypse that we saw in X-Men Age of Apocalypse. When they approach,
See what I'm saying? They do such a good job.
Paul Rudd finally aged.
A reference to how Ant-Man actor Paul Rudd seems eternally timeless, which is probably how humans must appear to our dogs and cats.
I grow older, and yet he stays eternal, never changing. My person.
Now notice how Giant Man is reaching for something. So when Colton Ogburn and I broke down the most recent Deadpool and Wolverine trailer, he had a great theory. You guys know Colton. He's the guy who's trapped eternally in our television, but he doesn't know, so please don't tell him.
Okay, so hear me out. In Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we see a Giant Man reaching for the power core, and then he gets spaghettified. He gets too close to that energy, and he gets noodled, just like we saw happen to Victor Timely when he got too close to that kind of energy, and just like we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine when Cassandra Nova is messing with the Time Ripper. We see the noodles. So theoretically, if these noodles mean that you are getting wiped from time, where would you end up? The Void. So I think that this Giant Man that we see laying in the Void with his arms stretched out like this is the same Giant Man from Quantumania that was reaching for that power core and got noodled and sent to the Void.
That is a really fun theory. And then we get cameos galore. We see Azazel, who was Sebastian Shaw's teleporter in X-Men First Class, and he joined Magneto at the end of that movie, but he was absent from the rest of the series because he got pruned. Although it is heavily implied that he is Nightcrawler's father. This guy from the striped shirt is from The Punisher, and his name is simply the Russian. And this is the Juggernaut from X-Men.
I knew that was a Russian.
So in that movie, he was played by Vinnie Jones, but he's been recast here. Deadpool even says that he's yet another Juggernaut because he also went up against a different Juggernaut in Deadpool 2.
I'm gonna rip you in half now.
There's also the Blob, who appeared in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Picture this. You're sitting at home alone
Son of a
watching YouTube
bitch.
videos,
These
wondering
fucking
why you
commercials.
can't find the motivation to do the
Did you just call me Blob?
We also see Lady Deathstrike, a woman with adamantium fingernails that Wolverine fought in X2. And then we meet Cassandra Nova. Now, in the comics, Cassandra Nova is one of the most vicious, horrendous villains the X-Men have ever faced. As she says in this movie, she was strangled by Charles Xavier in the womb. So in the comics, it gets a lot more complicated than that. She's not actually Charles's biological sister. She's an interdimensional being who reproduced his genetic structure. Then she was expelled from the womb, and then she lived on the side of a sewer as a pile of goo before she gave herself human form. She's also the person who initiated the Genosha Massacre that we saw adapted in the excellent episode Remember It of X-Men 97. Now in the movie, they tease for just a second that she could be Charles Xavier, even having her sit in one of his old wheelchairs at the top of this ramp. But then the ramp becomes stairs, and Deadpool warns her that the woke mob will come after her for ableism. Careful. And they keep referring to Charles as Chuck, the nickname that Wolverine gave him just to annoy him in the comics. And how disgusting was the body horror of her reaching into people's minds. I thought this was a very great, visceral way to portray what it would be like to have a telepath invade your head. It works much better visually than seeing an actor put a finger in their tadpole and close their eyes. And then Cassandra peels the skin off Johnny's body, setting up the post-credit scene where we learned that Johnny actually deserved it. Johnny Storm was always kind of a D-bag in the Fantastic Four films, so, this brings his character full circle. Deadpool justifies this by saying Chris Evans staying in the movie would have overinflated their budget.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have Apple money. Oh, wait, too soon? sorry.
Deadpool even says that he was not his favorite Chris because there are so many of them, especially in superhero movies. When the fight starts, Deadpool says, "My boy is wicked strong," which is a callback to this.
Somehow Palpatine returns.
Sorry, I meant to this.
My boy's wicked smart.
That expression has become shorthand for "my buddy is a badass and will kick your ass in areas where I feel outclassed." Wolverine and Deadpool escape by using a jet foot from a retro Sentinel that we saw in Days of Future Past. I love how Logan immediately recognized the Sentinel leg and he knew that he could hotwire it. After all, the same leg knocked him out a little earlier in the movie. As they escape, Deadpool says he's telling Blake about Wolverine's dirty mind, and this is the second reference to his wife Blake Lively, but it's not going to be the last. They end up at Joe's Diner, and if that looks familiar, it's because this is the same diner that appears in the comics. He tells Wolverine that he started wearing his red suit because of blood stains, which is exactly what happened in the first Deadpool movie.
Salsa water and lemon for blood. Well, we're red.
He also mentions that he failed to become an Avenger and an X-Men, which we saw occur in Deadpool 2.
You're wasting your time, Shiny Jesus. I'm not X-Men material.
And then, there she is, you guys. Mary Poppins, a.k.a. Dogpool. She is such a good girl.
I see what the big deal is. Just some stupid puppy. Big tongue.
And then we meet Nice Pool, who is handsome Ryan Reynolds with long hair. And he is so nice and so Canadian. I feel like this was also a callback to the early run of the Christopher Priest Deadpool comics when Loki cast a spell on Deadpool to make him handsome. When he introduces Wolverine, he points out that he usually is super jacked, but now he's let himself go since the divorce. This is because Hugh Jackman has recently been divorced from his longtime wife. He also mentions that Lady Deadpool just had a baby, and later in the movie we see she's played by Blake Lively, who recently had a child with Ryan Reynolds in real life. As they travel in Nice Pool's Honda Odyssey, we see one of Thanos' ring ships from Avengers Infinity War. When they get in the car, Deadpool searches for the right song, just like the black SUV fight in Deadpool 1. And he scrubs past the song from The Greatest Showman, which starred Hugh Jackman.
Tell me, do you wanna go?
And then Wade runs his mouth too much and tries to cover it up by doing Spider-Man flips to distract the audience.
Stop it.
I love the next fight scene where the two of them are sitting in a car for most of the fight. They created some really neat choreography by using their seatbelts. So the fight is set to the song "You're the One That I Want" from Grease. In the song, Danny and Sandra Dee are essentially making demands of each other for the other person to be worthy of their time. It's actually kind of perfect for this song, which is about these two people working out their differences before they actually fight alongside one another. I also like the small detail that Nice Pool has one of those coexist bumper stickers on his car. The two of them pass out and are found by X-23, aka Laura, who is Wolverine's daughter from Logan. When she takes them back to her lair, we see my favorite Easter egg of the movie. Guys, this is a statue of the Scarlet Witch. Now, you remember that in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, we learned that there was a prophecy about Wanda. It was prophesied that a chaos god called Chthon would use her to destroy the world. But instead, Wanda defied this prophecy and destroyed an evil book called the Darkhold in every reality, and apparently sacrificed her life.
Rooms loads a complete serving of fruits, veggies,
I hate commercials.
minerals, super mushrooms,
This is how they get you
probiotics,
guys,
and
the commercials.
But now I'm thinking that she actually ended up in the Void. So if the MCU does do a soft reboot after Secret Wars, Wanda can make up for her past by destroying the world, as the prophecy said. But in destroying the world, she would also create a new universe where all of these different characters are combined in the same universe to begin with, and we don't have to worry about variant timelines anymore. Then we meet the rebels against Cassandra Nova. We have Jennifer Garner's Elektra. And that's one of the few superhero movies that I have never seen. It's also funny because Jon Favreau's in this movie as Happy Hogan, and in that franchise, Jon Favreau played Foggy Nelson. And then, guys, this is so good, we get the return of Wesley Snipes as Blade. Guys, Blade originated the successful Marvel movie franchises. I cannot even express how big of a deal it was to see Blade in 1998 and to see that they finally got it right. His last film was Blade Trinity, which was not good at all. And that film also starred Ryan Reynolds. Wesley Snipes was famously difficult to work with on that movie, often retreating into his trailer for hours on end and communicating with the director by passing notes. And Deadpool alludes to this troubled past when he says that Wesley Snipes never liked him. And then we get what is by far the greatest cameo of the movie, Channing Tatum as Gambit.
Oh, Channing Tatum played Gambit?
No, Taylor Kitsch played Gambit briefly in Origins Wolverine. But Channing Tatum really wanted to play the character. He loves Gambit and was trying to develop a Gambit movie with Fox for years. And knowing that, now you get all the jokes where Deadpool tells him that maybe nobody ever really wanted him to be in the movie or play this role. At one point, Deadpool even calls him Sling Blade, a reference to the Louisiana set Billy Bob Thornton movie.
I kind of want something other to eat.
He calls Gambit the superhero version of Hawkeye because Hawkeye isn't really a superhero, no powers. And then he says that his power is close-up magic, which is wrong. That power belongs to Jimmy Woo.
James E. Woo.
Oh, jeez.
FBI.
And then he accuses him of taking dialect lessons from these guys.
Hold on 1 second. What the fuck? Just got an update. What the fuck? Oh, of course, he put 11:30 to 4:30 now. This fucking guy. I'd rather take that than the fucking 3:30.
They also name-drop Magneto and his helmet that would stop Cassandra's powers. Of course, Magneto invented this helmet to stop Xavier from probing his mind. And then Deadpool blames Disney for being cheap and says some profane things about Pinocchio. They also mention that the Punisher used to be in the Void, and Wade references, well, which one? There have been 4 of them, which is true. There was Dolph Lundgren, Thomas Jane, the late great Ray Winstone, and now John Barenthal. They also mention Quicksilver and Daredevil are dead. Now, in the X-Men movies, Quicksilver was way overpowered. And if had he been in this movie, it wouldn't have been very good because he could have just solved everybody's problems. But the Daredevil that they're referencing is actually Ben Affleck's version. When Wade offers condolences, Jennifer Gardner says it's fine because those co-stars were married and divorced in real life. When Deadpool rallies the troops, he says you can avenge your universes. And guys, that's anchor being talk.
We can't protect the Earth. You can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
And then Blade says what he really wants is legacy, maybe in reference to how Blade Trinity was by far the worst in the series. Later in the movie, he also says that there will never be another Blade, which really felt like a tongue-in-cheek reference to all the pre-production problems Marvel has had getting Mahershala Ali's version of the character off the ground. Notice that Laura has an X belt buckle, which implies that maybe she and the other orphans restarted some kind of X team. And later we see the worst Wolverine also has this same symbol on his belt. It's a nice way to show their inherent connection. Cassandra's forces are flying an Avengers flag, which is repainted with an anarchy symbol. I also want to flag here that a telepath living inside of a giant skull is pretty funny. The first fight of the movie was with a skeleton, and one of the last fights is inside of a skeleton. Now, this is appropriate since the movie is about the deaths of universes, but Wade is also out to prove that his universe should survive because it has metaphorical strong bones, unlike the Human Torch. During the fight, we get to see Elektra fight Toad, and Gambit fights with his signature playing cards and staff, and then Blade fights Azazel, who, out of all these characters looks the most like a vampire, so I guess that fits. Elektra is excited that they're all finally going to get a proper ending because, all of these franchises fizzled out and kind of went nowhere. There's also a lot of fun callbacks in this fight, like when Blade repeats one of his all-time greatest lines.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
And we also see Laura wearing the same sunglasses that she stole in the movie Logan, which is a very sweet gesture because it means that she hung on to these because they remind her of her dad. I also like seeing Toad's tongue used against him as a weapon. All right, and so the Juggernaut's entire deal is that he can never be stopped. And I love that X-23 found a really vicious way to stop him by severing his Achilles tendons.
One could even say that it was his Achilles' weakness.
Blade uses the same batarang that he used in his first film in the Blood Dance Club, and Cassandra's forces have guns that charge up like Hydra weapons from First Avenger. And all around, guys, I love Gambit in this fight. Channing Tatum was definitely auditioning to keep playing this part in new X-Men movies. Then Cassandra Nova enters Wolverine's head from inside Ant-Man's head and delivers our prophesized flashback.
The prophecy.
we see this vision of Wolverine alongside these tall tombstones. Now, this visual was actually lifted from the original Days of Future Past comic book. I also thought it was interesting that he is surrounded by a field of wheat. In Moon Knight, we saw a similar field representing the afterlife. And in Deadpool/Logan's universe, it was genetically modified corn syrup that ended up killing off the mutant race. It is possible that gluten did the same thing in other universes, which would actually be a funny callback to this line from Deadpool.
I was rounding up all the gluten in the world and launching in space where it can't not hurt us ever again.
Wolverine says that he started by killing the bad guys and he didn't stop there. So I think this means he went on to kill the heroes in this universe, which if they were Fox movies would have been the Fantastic Four and Daredevil. And he kept doing this until every human hated and distrusted all mutants, but especially the X-Men. Now this is similar to one of the comics that inspired this movie, Old Man Logan. In that comic book, Logan is haunted by his past, where he inadvertently killed the X-Men because he was fooled by one of Mysterio's illusions. So in the distant future, Logan lives in a wasteland ruled by supervillains and then decides to go off and kill them one at a time. And in another comic that inspired this movie, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, Wade kills every hero, villain, civilian, and the creators of the Marvel Universe itself. When Wade and Logan are holding Cassandra Nova, it reminded me of how Thanos was pinned down in Infinity War. And just like in Infinity War, they completely botched the situation. In this scene, Deadpool refers to Wolverine as Mr. PG-13, except the last one. And that's true. Logan was the first and only R-rated Wolverine movie. But I think this was kind of a special dig because Deadpool was the first R-rated X-Men movie, and you can make the argument that James Mangold and Hugh Jackman rode the coattails that Ryan Reynolds pioneered. Meanwhile, Pyro is similar to the villain Cypher from the Matrix movies. In both films, the character lives in an alternate reality, and they're secretly working with an unknown force that controls that alternate reality and agree to betray their leaders. After a few shots to her gut, they reach a stalemate with Cassandra, and she agrees to use a sling ring that she stole off a Doctor Strange variant that she murdered. Now, it is interesting that sling rings, which we've seen multiple times in the MCU, also have the ability to teleport people to the void. Because, as we saw in Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange cannot travel to different universes. So the void is more like a nexus point between all realities. It's the center of that wheel I was talking about earlier. So that means that anybody could reach the void with a sling ring. Again, this could feature very heavily in Avengers Secret Wars. Afterwards, she has 3 stripes of blood on her chin, which look like Wolverine's claws. I think this is a subtle way for Wolverine to look at her and see that the two of them both seeking vengeance makes them too much alike. And this is part of the reason he chooses a better path. Cassandra then tells us her new master plan to destroy every universe except the Void. Again, this is a lot like Doctor Doom in the 2015 Secret Wars comic book. I actually feel like they can't do that story now because it's already been done here. So, if you guys have any theories about what will happen as Avengers Secret Wars, let me know down in the comments below. And then we see Hunter B-15 from the show Loki. So Hunter B-15 had a great arc in that series. She started off as a sycophant for the Timekeepers.
And if you see a Loki, prove it.
With HoneyBook, you can make sure your marketing business is as polished and professional as you really are. Here's how. I'm Millie, a content creator coach and business owner. If I had to start my business from zero, I would have focused on building out my client experience with HoneyBook. HoneyBook is a client flow management platform for anyone working with clients. Think about how you're managing your clients right now. Email 20 times a day, invoices here.
And then later she realizes the Timekeepers had taken advantage of her by erasing her memories.
I looked happy.
So, in Loki Season 2, she is one of the strongest advocates for not erasing the universe from existence, which is why she comes down so hard on Paradox later in the movie. Logan and Wolverine land at a store called Rob Liefeld's Just Feet, a dig at the Deadpool co-creator who was bad at drawing feet and just about everything else. Outside, Laura gives Wolverine a pep talk. Now, I know some of you are wondering if this is Laura from the actual movie Logan or a variant of Laura, but we're going to save all of that kind of stuff for our theory videos that are going to be coming out in the next few days. When Wolverine explains why he now wears the yellow spandex, he says that Scott and Jean and Beast wanted him to wear the uniform. So this version of Wolverine was more of a loner than the version from the X-Men films, and his isolation ended up getting his team killed. Guys, this was a great way to bring the yellow suit into this universe. The Hugh Jackman Wolverine that we've seen in past movies would never willingly agree to wear this ridiculous yellow costume. But character's so badass that he made it work. And I totally believe that he would wear this costume out of guilt, like it's a kind of penance or contrition that he has to do to atone for his past sins. As the team travels to Cassandra's fortress, they pass the ruins of Asgard and the Guardians of the Galaxy ship, the Benatar. When they arrive, they square up against all of these generic mutants from Magneto's team in X-Men 3 The Last Stand. And gang, not for nothing, X-Men 3 did give us our first giant superhero melee battle.
Yeah, but it was lame.
And then the Deadpool Corps show up, and in the comics, the Deadpool Corps was a multiversal group of Deadpools that were formed by Deadpool from the 616 universe. He recruited them to achieve a great cosmic purpose, and in this movie, the main Deadpool also calls himself Deadpool Prime, which is probably a reference to Superboy Prime from DC Comics. And then the Deadpool Corps show up, and there are a ton of Easter eggs in this scene, some from the comics, and some are just fun versions they made up for the movie. They are led by the aforementioned Lady Deadpool, played by Blake Lively. From the comics, we see Headpool and Kidpool. This is Welshpool, which is probably a nod to Ryan Reynolds' soccer team, Wrexham FC, who are based in Wales. There's also this top hat magician Deadpool. This looks like African Deadpool, Cupid Deadpool with an arrow through his head, Cowboy Pool, Deadpool 2099, based on the 2099 comics, Golden Age Deadpool, who looks like he's from the 1940s, Ronan Pool, and at the very end of the fight, Ronan Pool regrows baby arms like Wade's baby legs in Deadpool 2. Here we see Zen Pool, and after they all pose, notice that Baby Pool is just sitting down. And my personal favorite, Scottish Pool, who also is wielding a giant claymore sword. This is all inspired by the comic book Deadpool Kills Deadpool, where an evil Deadpool variant leads an army of himself against Deadpool 616. He essentially does this because he's suicidal and wants to end his torturous existence. They are aided by Nice Pool, who is also nicknamed Van Milder. This is a play on the Ryan Reynolds movie Van Wilder, and then Nice Pool replies with the proposal, another Ryan Reynolds movie. And the reason he has a handsome face is because he was never experimented on, which is why he cannot regenerate. And then we get this badass single-shot Deadpool melee. Now, during this fight, we see a tribute to Stan Lee on an ad for Stan Lee steamers, but the most touching tribute in the scene is this one to Raymond Chan at the very end. Chan was a supervising art director on many Marvel movies, including this one, and he died earlier this year. There's even a dedication to him in the credits. He was responsible for the look of many films that became the bedrock of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And during this fight, I really respect that Deadpool recognized that the multiverse saga was a huge mess and that Marvel should just take the L and move on. And then Nice Pool says that, he's loved everything after Endgame, which, Liar! Wade also claims that The Wizard of Oz did the multiverse first, which is not true. It's a Wonderful Life was the first multiverse movie. And then he says, I am not a medicine woman, which I think is a tongue-in-cheek reference to Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. And Screen Crush, you have to admit that this was like the most exciting Marvel melee since Avengers Endgame. How amazing was it when we finally got to see a comic-accurate Wolverine mask on screen? Deadpool even mentions how it's better than Batman's mask because at least he can turn his head. And this is making fun of the original Batman suit worn by Michael Keaton, where essentially he was in a frozen rubber condom for the entire film. Also notice how Dogpool just randomly runs back and forth from one side of the screen to the other. It's just magical. And this entire fight was really just an excuse to see Wolverine and Deadpool kick some ass against a bunch of literal red shirts who can't die. And I love that it ended by exploiting every Deadpool's love for Peter. This entire fight was the equivalent of Brian falling in the spaceship in the life of Brian, and I loved it. Now, the Time Ripper runs on antimatter, just like the multiversal loom that we saw in the second season of Loki. This sets up Deadpool for a heroic death, fulfilling what he said earlier in the film. I am Marvel Jesus. So Wade closes himself behind a glass door and makes a reference to the death of Spock and the Wrath of Khan.
This one analytics settings error cost a company $1.5 million. I don't want it.
But then when all is lost, Wolverine also emerges to sacrifice his life as Madonna's Like a Prayer plays. So this music video is filled with Christian imagery, so it's appropriate for a scene where two heroes of the Fox X-Men universe spread out their arms like a crucifix pose to literally kill themselves to save their franchise. This is also like a reverse Samson, who pushed down two pillars to bring down the Philistines' temple on their heads. Except here, Wade is pulling the pillars inwards to hold the universe together. But of course, these are superheroes, and not even Logan can stay dead. I also thought it was nice that they gave Hugh Jackman one last chance to show off how freaking ripped he is. Then Hunter B-15 shows them a miracle that their timeline has been restored. And I think this is because now they are both stars of this franchise. And this franchise has crossover potential with the Sacred Timeline, aka the 616, aka the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hunter B-15 also confirms that they cannot change Logan's past, because doing this would change the man he is, which would then change all he has accomplished. So this is confirming the time travel rules that the Hulk established in Avengers Endgame.
Think about it. If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future. And your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
And then Logan and Wade eat shawarma, which, as they reference, is a callback to the post-credit scene of the Avengers. Wade even acknowledges that the Avengers kind of made shawarma because after the movie was released, the food had a massive spike in popularity. At first, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine says that we probably won't see him again. But remember, Not wanting to be a joiner is actually what ruined his universe, so he decides to stay with Wade and his friends. We even get a family dinner ending like most Multiverse Saga shows and movies as of late.
Wow, yeah, there are a lot of family dinner endings.
Yeah, you'd think Wade would have at least acknowledged that the Fast and the Furious have already done this. And I'll be honest, guys, I got a little misty-eyed during the credits. Like, I grew up with those Fox X-Men movies. For better or worse, those were some of the first actual good Marvel movies that we ever had. A lot of very talented people worked so hard to make those films, and I am so grateful for the work of those filmmakers and the people who made this movie. I had so much fun watching Deadpool and Wolverine. This movie raised a lot of questions, and I think that, we're going to get a lot of answers at San Diego Comic-Con. So please subscribe here at Screen Crush, where we're going to be breaking down all things Deadpool and Wolverine for a very long time. Big shout out to the team who edited this massive beast of an Easter egg video. I could not do it without you guys, and I have the best job in the world. So, what did you guys think of the movie? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Eric.
Take my precious water and put it in the water brush. Alright, so that was a Screen Crush thing. I don't know if you guys were following along. I know that's not exciting with the music, but I really wanted to watch this today.
Rated T for teen.
Let's see how this goes. Again, if you guys got like 10 minutes left on the here, gonna be a little bit too dark there. Throw the micro cloth on top. My artistic jizz rag. These are great for soaking up excess water. And then the desert will dry out the rest. So I think I'm pretty much done. What do you guys think? I might turn this into a print maybe. I don't know. I'll scan it and maybe color it. I have like 3 or 4 things I want to scan and color. Not they're already scanned. I want to finish that Rogue Savage Land piece I did. That would be fucking cool. All right. And it looks like I got to do some messages. All right, so that's it for this piece. If you want to get it, you can just buy this one. Just let me know, and you can just buy the black and white comic size illustration that's on there if you want to get this piece. If you want your own piece, let me know. I thought this was going to go into the portfolio. Again, I'm going to probably make this into maybe a print on here. Man, I keep getting messages. Other than that, guys, thanks for joining me as always on here. It was fun watching Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm probably going to cover it on my podcast this week. If you want to see more, go to FWACATA.com. You can see all the stuff on there. And if you want to get anything done by me or anything like that, you can always go to FWACATA.com and hit me up with an email. Also, messages here. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'm out of here.